The hall was crowded, lights shining bright, cameras ready to catch every word. But something unusual hung in the air that night. People were whispering, tension rising, as if everyone knew something was wrong, but no one wanted to say it out loud. It was supposed to be a simple charity gala, a celebration of kindness where actors, musicians, and ordinary people came together to raise money for a children's hospital. But in the middle of the happiness, a sudden announcement froze the room. The main donation envelope had gone missing. The host's voice trembled as he explained that without the donations, the hospital project might be delayed. Some guests gasped, some grew angry, and others exchanged suspicious looks. A shadow of blame began to fall over the staff working backstage. People whispered about mistakes, about theft, about betrayal. Sandra Bullock stood near the side of the stage, watching the crowd grow restless. She felt her heart race because she knew how quickly rumors could destroy trust. And then, through the noise, Keanu Reeves walked in. He was not late. He was simply quiet, moving slowly through the people like he was part of them, not above them. Eyes turned toward him, and the whispers grew louder. Many expected him to take control, to raise his voice, to point fingers, or demand answers. Instead, Keanu stopped, looked around, and lowered his voice so softly that people had to lean closer to hear. "Money can be replaced," he said calmly, "but trust cannot." His words were almost a whisper, yet they carried across the hall. The anger softened for a moment, but confusion filled the air too. Why was he so calm? Why wasn't he angry that something this important had disappeared? People started to wonder if he knew something they did not. Sandra kept her eyes on him, curious, unsettled, and strangely moved. As the evening continued, the suspense only grew stronger. While others argued or panicked, Keanu quietly moved from person to person. He comforted a nervous volunteer who thought she might lose her job. He helped a janitor sweep up broken glass from a tray that had fallen during the commotion. He even gave his jacket to a young usher who was shivering in the cold air near the back door. But he never raised his voice, never showed frustration, never blamed anyone. The whispers changed direction now. People began saying, "Why is he silent? Doesn't he care? Is he hiding something?" Sandra felt the weight of the moment. She had known Keanu for years, through films and friendship, but that night he seemed different. There was a mystery in his silence, something deeper than simple patience. She walked toward him once, ready to ask what he was thinking, but he only looked at her with calm eyes and gave a small smile. Then he turned away to help another volunteer. It left her unsettled, like he was carrying a secret no one else could see. Suddenly, the host announced again that without the missing donations, the children's hospital wing would not be built. Gasps echoed around the hall, and frustration began to rise once more. Reporters prepared their headlines, guests prepared their judgments, and the evening seemed ready to collapse into scandal. Sandra's heart sank. She thought of the children who had been promised new rooms, better care, a brighter future. It felt like hope itself was slipping away. But Keanu remained still. Then he walked slowly toward Sandra and leaned close so only she could hear his words. His voice was so low she almost missed them, but when she caught the meaning, her eyes widened in shock. Her breath caught in her chest, and for a moment she could not speak. She looked at him with disbelief, but he gave only that calm smile again. The mystery grew. What had he whispered to her? Why did her eyes look as if she had seen something unbelievable? The crowd noticed the quiet exchange, and the suspense deepened. People wanted answers, but none came. Keanu walked away as if nothing had happened, as if his whisper was not a secret, but a truth waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Sandra stood frozen, torn between speaking and staying silent. She felt respect rising in her heart, but also confusion and a deep curiosity that would not let go. That night was only the beginning. What Keanu had whispered would lead to a chain of events no one in that hall could have expected. It would test friendships, reveal hidden truths, and show the world that sometimes silence carries more weight than shouting, and sometimes kindness is strongest when spoken in a lowered voice. The hall slowly returned to its routine rhythm, but it was no longer the same. The music played softly in the background. The waiters carried trays of food, and the cameras kept flashing. Yet there was a shadow over the entire event. Whispers spread faster than the music could drown them. People were asking the same question again and again. What did Keanu whisper to Sandra? Sandra herself was still shaken. Her hand trembled slightly as she held her glass of water. She replayed his words in her mind again and again, and each time her heart beat faster. She wanted to tell someone, but she could not. She felt that what Keanu had told her was not hers to reveal. Not yet. It was heavy with meaning, like a story half-written, waiting for its right ending. She looked at him across the room. Keanu was not standing on stage, not giving speeches, not seeking attention. He was quietly blending into the crowd. But everywhere he went, small acts of kindness followed. He helped an elderly guest adjust his chair. He stopped to listen to a nervous teenager who had been invited as part of a student program. He carried boxes with the staff as if he was one of them, not the guest of honor. Yet his silence added to the tension. Many guests grew restless. One woman whispered sharply, "He knows something. That's why he's so calm." Another man muttered, "If he really cared, he would demand answers like the rest of us." But Sandra knew better. She had seen his eyes when he whispered. There was no fear there, no calculation, only humility and certainty. She began to wonder if maybe the missing envelope wasn't the disaster everyone thought it was. The evening dragged forward, each moment heavy. The organizers were under pressure. Reporters were pushing for statements and guests were losing patience. Finally, a frustrated businessman raised his voice and accused one of the young volunteers of negligence. The boy's face turned pale and his lips trembled as he tried to defend himself. Before the situation could worsen, Keanu stepped forward. Again, he did not shout, he did not argue. He simply lowered his voice and spoke to the boy. "Look at me," he said gently. "Breathe. This is not your fault. Do not let anyone's anger break your spirit." The boy's eyes filled with tears. The businessman tried to speak again, but Keanu raised his hand calmly, still in silence, and looked at him with quiet strength. It was not a glare, it was not aggression, it was respect, a silent reminder that cruelty only makes pain worse. The man stopped speaking. Sandra's heart tightened as she watched. She realized something important. Keanu's lowered voice was not weakness. It was power, a different kind of power, the kind that did not crush but healed, the kind that did not dominate but lifted others up. Yet, the mystery of the missing envelope remained. By now, the guests believed the night would end in shame. Sandra overheard two women say, "Maybe the donations are gone forever. Maybe the children will never get their hospital wing." Their words cut deep into her, but she could not shake what Keanu had told her. After a while, the event's host walked nervously onto the stage again. His voice cracked as he announced that without the funds, they could not make their promised donation public. The crowd gasped, disappointed and frustrated. Cameras flashed even faster, ready to capture a scandal. But then, a small shift happened. Keanu walked to the back of the hall, not the stage, not the spotlight, but the very back. He whispered something to one of the organizers and handed him a small folded piece of paper. The organizer read it and his face went pale. Then he looked at Keanu with wide eyes, nodding slowly. Sandra noticed, and the suspense inside her grew unbearable. She wanted to run and ask, but she held back. As the evening reached its peak, Sandra decided to follow Keanu quietly. She found him standing alone near a dim corner of the hall, where the lights were not bright and the cameras could not reach. He was staring at an old framed photograph on the wall, an image of children from the very hospital they were trying to support. "Keanu," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. He turned and his calm smile returned, though his eyes looked heavier than before. "You whispered something to me," Sandra said, her voice trembling. "And now I see you whispering to others. You're carrying something, aren't you? Something you don't want the world to know?" Keanu lowered his gaze. For a moment it looked like he might answer, but then he shook his head gently. "Sometimes," he whispered, "kindness loses its meaning if it asks for recognition." Sandra froze. Her heart pounded with realization. She wanted to press him further, but she also understood that pushing too hard might break the fragile truth he was protecting. Before she could say more, another organizer approached, holding the folded paper Keanu had given earlier. The man's voice was shaky. "This changes everything," he said quietly. Sandra's breath caught. She looked at Keanu, who simply nodded, his voice as soft as ever. Not everything, he said. Only what matters. She felt chills run through her body. The puzzle pieces were moving, but the picture was not yet complete. What was written on that folded paper? Why was Keanu lowering his voice again and again as if he was protecting a fragile secret? And why did Sandra feel that whatever he was hiding was not about money, but about something much larger, something that could change the entire meaning of the night? The suspense was unbearable. Yet in her heart, Sandra knew one thing for certain. When the truth came out, it would not be about scandal or shame. It would be about kindness, about respect, and about a shocking act of humility that no one in that hall could have predicted. And she also knew, deep down, that the world was not ready for it. The night grew colder outside the hall, but inside the tension only burned hotter. Guests shifted in their seats, some whispering in frustration, others waiting for answers that never seemed to arrive. The gala had turned from celebration to confusion, and yet, through all the noise, Keanu remained the same, calm, steady, his voice lowered, his presence almost invisible unless you looked closely. Sandra Bullock could not take her eyes off him. She had known him for years, had seen him in front of cameras, had worked with him on sets where the lights never dimmed. But this version of Keanu was different. He was not acting, not performing. His silence carried more weight than the loudest voice in the room, and she could feel it drawing her closer, as if there was a hidden truth behind his every step. The folded paper that Keanu had handed to the organizer earlier still lingered in her mind. What could it possibly contain? She saw the man holding it tightly, his hands trembling, his lips sealed, as if he had been entrusted with a secret he dared not share. Finally, unable to contain her curiosity, Sandra approached the organizer quietly. "What did he give you?" she asked softly. The man looked at her nervously, then at Keanu, who was now helping an elderly guest with his cane. "I can't say," he whispered. "But it changes everything." Sandra felt her pulse quicken. She wanted to demand more, but she stopped herself. She knew that if Keanu had chosen silence, there was a reason. Instead, she stepped back and watched, waiting for her moment. Then something unexpected happened. One of the reporters, frustrated by the lack of answers, decided to confront Keanu directly. The man marched across the floor, microphone in hand, cameras following him like hunters chasing prey. "Mr. Reeves," the reporter said loudly, "the people here want to know the truth. The money is gone. The hospital wing may never be built. You're one of the biggest names here. Why won't you speak up? Why won't you raise your voice like everyone else?" The hall fell silent. All eyes turned toward Keanu. This was the moment many had been waiting for. The moment they expected him to finally break his calm, to finally shout or accuse or reveal. But Keanu did not raise his voice. Instead, he lowered it even further. "Because," he said softly, "anger doesn't build hospitals. Only kindness does." His words were almost a whisper, but they cut through the silence like a blade of light. The reporter looked stunned, unsure how to respond. Some guests frowned, others gasped, and a few even scoffed. But Sandra felt her heart squeeze tightly. She knew there was something more behind those words, something he was not ready to share yet. The evening continued with heavier hearts. The host tried to keep spirits alive, but it was clear that the scandal of the missing donations was overshadowing everything. People began leaving early, shaking their heads, muttering about disappointment and failure, but Sandra stayed. She stayed because she knew something was hidden beneath the surface, and she could not leave without uncovering it. Later that night, she found Keanu sitting alone in the garden outside the hall. The noise of the party was far behind them now, replaced by the soft sound of wind moving through the trees. He was staring at the stars, his hands folded quietly in his lap. "Why do you keep lowering your voice?" she asked, her tone filled with both frustration and curiosity. "Don't you see? Everyone thinks you don't care. Everyone thinks you're hiding something. Why won't you just speak the truth out loud?" Keanu turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. There was no anger in his gaze, no defensiveness, only calm understanding. "Sandra," he whispered, "truth isn't always about being the loudest. Sometimes the strongest truth is the one spoken quietly, the one that doesn't demand attention, the one that waits to be discovered. Her breath caught in her chest. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, a young girl approached them. She was no more than 12 years old. Wearing a plain dress, her hands nervously clutching a small notebook. "Mr. Reeves," the girl said softly. "Thank you." Keanu smiled gently. "For what?" The girl looked at him with wide eyes. "For the books? For the tablets. For the letters you sent, the children at the hospital. They said it was from a friend, but I knew it was you." Sandra froze. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth was beginning to spill out, piece by piece. Keanu shook his head gently. "No one needs to know that," he whispered. "It was never about me. It was about them." The girl nodded shyly, tears in her eyes before running back toward the hall. Sandra stared at him, stunned. "Keanu," she said, her voice trembling, You've been supporting that hospital all along, haven't you?" He lowered his gaze again, his voice soft as ever. "Please don't say it out loud. Sometimes kindness loses its meaning when it seeks recognition." The shock hit her like a wave. The missing envelope, the calm silence, the folded paper, it was all connected. But the full truth still wasn't clear. She knew there was more, much more, hidden beneath his quiet humility. And in that moment, Sandra realized something. The real suspense was not whether the money would be found. The real suspense was how long Keanu could keep his secret before the world discovered that the missing donations were never missing at all, because he had already given more than anyone imagined. The night was far from over, and the whispers, both his and the ones of the crowd, were only the beginning of a story that would shock everyone when the truth finally came to light. The gala had begun to empty, but the weight of the night did not leave with the guests. Instead, it lingered in the air like a secret waiting to be told. Sandra remained in the hall, restless, her thoughts circling like a storm. The young girl's words echoed inside her head. "The children at the hospital said it was from a friend. But I knew it was you." She tried to imagine what it meant. Keanu had always been humble, but could it really be true that he had been helping the hospital in silence for years? If that was the case, then why let tonight collapse into scandal? Why not simply reveal the truth and let everyone know? Her eyes searched the room for him again. He was nowhere in the crowd, nowhere on the stage. Then she noticed a side door left slightly open, a faint light glowing from within. Drawn by instinct, Sandra walked toward it quietly. Inside, she found Keanu alone in a small room filled with old photographs, letters, and worn-out journals stacked neatly on a table. He stood with his back to her, his head lowered, flipping through the pages of one of the journals. "Keanu," she said softly, almost afraid to break the silence. He turned slowly, his face calm but tired, like someone carrying a weight too heavy for one person alone. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Then tell me the truth," she said firmly. "Stop whispering secrets into corners. You've been helping the hospital, haven't you? The missing money. It's not missing at all, is it?" Keanu closed the journal gently and placed it on the table. He walked toward her, his steps slow, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than ever, yet every word struck her like a revelation. "Sandra," he whispered, "every time someone talks about kindness, they forget one thing. Kindness is not meant to be seen. It is meant to be felt." She frowned, frustrated yet moved. "You're deflecting again. You always speak like it's poetry, but the world out there is breaking. The reporters are tearing this night apart. The organizers are panicking. The children are waiting. Why keep your silence now?" Keanu's eyes softened. "Because if I speak too soon, they will think it was about me. And it was never about me." Her chest tightened with a mix of admiration and confusion. She wanted to shake him, to force him to reveal the truth. But she also respected the quiet dignity in his words. Before she could respond, the organizer who had received the folded paper earlier entered the room. His face was pale, his hands still gripping the note tightly. "Mr. Reeves," he said quietly, "are you sure about this? If I announce it now, the attention will fall entirely on you. The world will know." Keanu shook his head firmly. "Not yet. Not tonight. The children should be the story, not me." The man nodded slowly, torn between duty and respect. Sandra's curiosity burned hotter than ever. She wanted to demand to see what was written on that folded paper, but she held herself back. She knew she needed to earn that trust, not steal it. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Sandra found herself walking through the city streets beside Keanu. The gala was over, but their conversation was only beginning. "Do you know what people see when they look at you?" she asked, her voice carrying the frustration she had been holding in. "They see a man who has it all but chooses to stay silent. They think you don't care, but I've seen enough tonight to know that's not true. So why keep lowering your voice when the world needs to hear you?" Keanu paused on the sidewalk, the streetlights casting soft shadows across his face. His eyes looked distant, as if he was staring into memories no one else could see. "Because," he whispered, "the world already hears too many loud voices. Anger, pride, blame. They shout and shout, but nothing changes. Sometimes the only way to cut through the noise is to speak softly, so people are forced to listen with their hearts instead of their ears." Sandra felt tears sting her eyes. She had never heard kindness explained so simply, so powerfully, yet even as she felt respect swell in her heart, she could not ignore the puzzle that remained unsolved. "And the envelope?" she pressed. "Tell me the truth. What really happened tonight?" Keanu gave her the smallest of smiles, the kind that revealed nothing and everything all at once. "The envelope doesn't matter," he said quietly. "What matters is that the children will still get their hospital wing." Her breath caught. "How? Without the money?" But he interrupted gently. "You'll see, not now, but soon." His words left her trembling with suspense. It was as if he was holding back a tidal wave of truth, waiting for the perfect moment to release it. That night, Sandra could not sleep. She lay awake, thinking of his lowered voice, of the girl who had thanked him, of the folded paper the organizer carried, of the quiet kindness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. The more she thought, the clearer it became. Keanu Reeves was hiding a truth so shocking, so humble that when it was finally revealed, it would silence every doubt, every rumor, every whisper of scandal. She did not know when that moment would come, but she knew one thing with certainty. When Keanu finally chose to let the world hear the truth, it would not be through anger, not through pride, not through the loud voice of self-praise. It would be through the same lowered voice he had carried all night, the voice that spoke only kindness. The night after the gala, Sandra could not find peace. She sat near her window, staring at the city lights, trying to make sense of everything she had witnessed. The missing donation envelope, the folded paper, the whispers, the little girl's thank you. All of it swirled in her mind like puzzle pieces scattered across the floor. Every time she thought she had the picture complete, a new question appeared, and always at the center of it all was Keanu Reeves. Why did he lower his voice when everyone else shouted? Why did he calm anger instead of fueling it? And most of all, why did he seem to know something no one else dared to say? Sandra decided she could not sit idle any longer. The next morning, she returned to the children's hospital that the gala was meant to support. She arrived quietly, dressed simply, blending in with the parents waiting outside. What she saw made her heart ache. Children with bandages on their heads, children in wheelchairs, children laughing despite their pain. Every corner of the hospital was filled with stories of resilience. Nurses moved swiftly, doctors whispered encouragement, and parents held their little ones close. Sandra walked through the hallways, and soon she noticed something strange. Taped to the walls were drawings made by children, smiling suns, colorful houses, stick figures holding hands. But in the corner of many drawings was a small, repeated symbol, a tiny letter K, written carefully in lowercase. She stopped in front of one of the drawings and asked a nurse, "What does the K mean?" The nurse smiled warmly. "Oh, that's what the kids call their secret friend. Someone who has been helping the hospital for years, sending books, tablets, funds, and gifts. They don't know his name. They just call him K." Sandra felt her breath catch. Her hands shook slightly as the truth began to grow clearer. She asked softly, "Do you know who K.A. is?" The nurse shook her head. "No one does. He never signs his full name, never asks for recognition. But when the hospital was close to shutting down once, he covered the bills quietly. When a little boy needed surgery his parents could not afford, Kay made it possible. Whoever he is, he has saved lives. Sandra's throat tightened. She already knew. Deep inside, she knew. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered under her breath, "It's him. It's Keanu," but she could not say it out loud. Not yet. As she walked deeper into the hospital, she noticed more signs of his quiet kindness. In the playroom, children were playing with new toys, each box labeled only with the letter K in the library corner. Shelves of books bore small notes inside, "For you, from a friend." Then she found something that shook her completely. In the corner of the nurse's office, there was a stack of old letters kept in a folder. Sandra asked carefully if she could see them, and the nurse hesitated before finally allowing her. The letters were written in simple handwriting, each one filled with encouragement. "Dear child, I know you are scared, but remember, bravery is not about never being afraid. It is about smiling even when the world feels heavy. You are braver than you think. To the parents, I want you to know you are not alone. Someone sees your struggle. Someone stands quietly with you." Each letter was signed with the same single letter. Sandra pressed the papers to her chest, tears slipping down her face. She knew those words. She had heard the same tone, the same softness, the same quiet respect in Keanu's lowered voice. But the world outside still saw him as a mystery. To them, he was a silent guest at a failed gala, a man unwilling to raise his voice. Only she now carried the truth that he had been the unseen lifeline of the hospital all along. As she left the hospital, she felt both awe and conflict. Part of her wanted to tell the world, to erase the whispers of scandal, to clear his name. But another part of her respected his humility so deeply that she could not betray it. He had chosen silence for a reason, and breaking that silence felt like breaking his trust. That evening, Sandra found him again. He was sitting quietly at a small cafe wearing simple clothes, unnoticed by most people passing by. She sat across from him and placed the letters gently on the table. "I went to the hospital," she said softly. He looked at her calmly, then at the letters. For a moment he said nothing, then he smiled faintly, almost sadly. "You weren't supposed to see those," he whispered. Sandra leaned closer, her voice trembling. "How can you carry this alone? The world thinks you are silent, but I know the truth. You have been saving them quietly for years. Why not let them know? Why not let them thank you?" Keanu lowered his gaze. His voice, soft as ever, carried more weight than shouting ever could. Because the purest kindness is the one that expects nothing in return. If they knew it was me, it would stop being about the children. It would become about headlines, praise, and recognition. That is not why I do it. Sandra's heart ached at his words. She wanted to argue, but she could not. Deep down, she knew he was right. Yet the suspense grew heavier, because the gala scandal was spreading fast. Newspapers had begun to write stories about the missing donations. Reporters accused the organizers of mismanagement. Rumors spread online, painting a picture of chaos and failure, and through it all, Keanu remained silent. Sandra realized that the day was coming soon when the truth would have to break free. The folded paper, the organizers' trembling hands. The secret of Kay, all of it was moving toward a single moment. A shocking reveal that would silence every doubt. But until that moment arrived, the mystery of his lowered voice remained. And the world still did not know that behind that silence, behind that humility, was a man who had already given more than anyone could imagine. The scandal spread like fire. Within a day of the gala, news channels were replaying clips of the event, showing angry guests, disappointed organizers, and the frustrated reporter demanding answers from Keanu Reeves. Headlines flashed across screens. "Charity night fails to deliver," "Donations missing at star-studded gala," and "Reeves refuses to comment." The world was quick to judge. Strangers on social media questioned why Keanu had stayed quiet. Some accused him of indifference, others of hiding something. The same calm voice that had soothed the boy at the gala was now being twisted into a sign of guilt. Sandra Bullock watched it all unfold with growing unease. She sat in her living room, her phone buzzing with messages from friends and journalists, all asking the same question. Why didn't Keanu speak up? But she knew the truth. She had seen the letters, the drawings, the lowercase k. She had heard the little girl's gratitude. She had witnessed the weight of his silence. Yet she also knew the world did not understand silence. The world demanded noise, statements, defenses, and loud declarations of innocence. And Keanu refused to give them any. That night, she called him. When he answered, his voice was as calm as always, low and gentle, as if the chaos outside could never reach him. "Keanu," she said, "they're tearing you apart. People think you don't care. They think you walked away from those children." He was quiet for a long moment, and then he whispered, "Let them think. Kindness doesn't need defending." Her frustration grew. "But the hospital is suffering. The organizers are being blamed. Don't you see? Your silence is protecting everyone but yourself. How long can you keep this hidden?" His reply was soft but steady. "Until the right moment comes. If I reveal it now, it will become a show. Cameras, applause, headlines, and the children will be lost in the noise. I cannot let that happen." Sandra closed her eyes, torn between admiration and pain. She respected his humility, but she feared the cost. The next day, the situation worsened. The hospital itself came under pressure, accused of mishandling funds. Parents of patients grew scared. Would the promised new wing ever be built? Staff members began to panic as rumors spread of budget cuts. Sandra decided she had to act. She returned to the hospital, where she found a group of parents gathered in the lobby, their voices filled with worry. "They promised us better facilities," one father said bitterly. "Now it's all lies." "Our children need treatment," a mother cried, holding her weak son close. "We can't survive without that support." Sandra's heart broke at the sight. She wanted to shout the truth, to tell them that the man they accused of silence had been their secret guardian all along. But she remembered his words. Kindness loses its meaning if it seeks recognition. Instead, she tried to comfort them, reminding them that hope was not gone, that sometimes the darkest nights were only moments before dawn. But even as she spoke, she could feel the weight of Keanu's secret pressing harder against her chest. Later, she met him again. They walked quietly through a park at sunset, the world around them calm, though their hearts were anything but. "The hospital is suffering," she told him. "People are losing faith. I don't know how much longer you can keep this hidden." He looked at her with eyes full of quiet sadness. "Sandra," he whispered, "sometimes to truly help, you must be willing to be misunderstood. Sometimes you must let the world think you failed so that those who need the help never feel the burden of your name." She shook her head, tears welling. "But why you? Why carry this alone? Why take the blame when you've already given so much?" Keanu lowered his gaze. "Because it is not about me. It never was." They walked in silence for a long time. Then, almost by accident, Sandra stumbled upon another piece of the truth. As they passed a bench in the park, an old man recognized Keanu and rushed forward with gratitude in his eyes. "Mr. Reeves," the man said breathlessly, "I never had the chance to thank you. Years ago, when my grandson needed a surgery and we had no money, an envelope appeared on our doorstep. No name, no note, only enough to save his life. But the nurse told me, it came from you." Sandra froze, her heart racing. Keanu gave the man a gentle smile and shook his hand softly. "I'm glad he's well," he whispered. Then he nodded respectfully and continued walking as if the encounter was nothing. Sandra turned to him, stunned. "How many?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How many lives have you touched in silence?" Keanu did not answer. His silence was the answer. The suspense was reaching its breaking point. Sandra could feel it in the air, the sense that the quiet truth was about to collide with the loud world outside, because the scandal was no longer just talk. The media announced that a press conference would be held at the hospital in 3 days. The organizers would be forced to explain the missing funds, the failed promises, and the broken trust. Reporters were already preparing sharp questions, and Sandra knew the cameras would turn once more to Keanu Reeves. She looked at him with urgency. "This is it. You can't stay silent forever. If you don't speak, they will bury your kindness under their accusations. You have to choose. Will you keep lowering your voice, or will you finally let the world hear the truth?" Keanu's eyes met hers, steady and calm. "The truth will come," he whispered. But it must come at the right time, not a moment sooner. And as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Sandra realized that the shocking reveal was closer than ever. The world was about to hear a voice that had been lowered for so long, a voice that spoke only kindness. The day of the press conference arrived. The hospital lobby was filled with journalists, flashing cameras, nervous organizers, and worried parents holding their children close. The tension in the air was heavy, as if the entire weight of the scandal was pressing down on the room. Sandra Bullock sat quietly near the back, her heart racing. She knew what the world expected today. They expected blame. They expected anger. They expected someone to fall. But she also knew something they didn't, that Keanu Reeves was carrying a secret powerful enough to change the entire story. When Keanu entered the room, the noise exploded. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Reeves, where is the missing money? Why did you stay silent at the gala? Do you admit the hospital will never be built?" The flashes of cameras lit his face, but he remained calm. He did not raise his hand, did not demand silence, did not shout to control the chaos. Instead, he simply walked to the front and waited. Slowly, the noise faded. Everyone leaned forward, expecting a dramatic defense. But then, he did what no one expected. He lowered his voice. "The envelope you are looking for," he whispered softly, "was never lost." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. People looked at each other, puzzled. The organizers shifted uncomfortably. Keanu continued, his voice low but steady, forcing everyone to lean closer, to listen not with impatience but with attention. "Months before this night," he said gently, "the money was already given. Not through an envelope, not through applause, but quietly, directly to the place it was always meant to go. The hospital has already received what it needs." Gasps filled the hall. Reporters froze, their pens hovering in the air. The head organizer stepped forward, holding the folded paper Keanu had given him at the gala. His hands shook as he opened it and read aloud. "To the children," the note said, "this gift belongs to you, not to me. Let no name, no face, no applause take away from your courage. Signed, only a friend." The room fell silent. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. The truth was finally out. The missing envelope was never missing. Keanu had already given the full donation, anonymously, long before the gala. The scandal that had shaken the city was nothing but a shadow hiding an act of quiet kindness. But the reveal did not stop there. One by one, people began to stand up. The old man from the park, the little girl from the gala. Parents from the hospital, they began telling their stories. "My grandson is alive because of him. We had no books. And then they arrived, signed only with a K. My child's surgery was paid for when we had no hope." Each testimony was like a spark, and soon the room was ablaze with stories of unseen kindness. Every voice pointed to the same truth. Keanu Reeves had been the anonymous guardian of the hospital for years. The reporters sat stunned. The cameras, which had come to capture scandal, were now capturing something greater: humility. Sandra stepped forward, unable to hold back her emotions. Her voice shook as she said, "I thought he was silent, but all I heard was kindness." Keanu looked at her, his calm smile unchanged. Then he turned back to the crowd, lowering his voice once more. "This was never about me," he whispered. "It was about the children. If tonight has any meaning, let it not be about uncovering a secret. Let it be about remembering that respect is built not by shouting louder, but by listening softer. Kindness does not need a stage. It only needs a willing heart." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, people began to stand. Applause filled the room, not the noisy applause of celebration, but the respectful applause of hearts moved beyond words. Some clapped with tears in their eyes, others bowed their heads in gratitude. Sandra felt her chest swell with pride. She realized that this was the shocking reveal she had been waiting for. Not a twist of scandal, not a trick of drama, but the simple, breathtaking truth that humility was stronger than any rumor. The press conference ended not with accusations, but with respect. The hospital announced that construction on the new wing would begin immediately. Donations began pouring in from people inspired by the story. And everywhere, The message spread. Kindness is strongest when it doesn't demand to be seen. Later that evening, Sandra walked beside Keanu once more. The world now knew his secret, yet he looked as calm and quiet as ever. "You could have told them sooner," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "But then they would have heard my name. Tonight, they heard kindness instead." She lowered her eyes, touched more deeply than she could explain. The stars shone above them, and for the first time in days, the city felt quiet. No shouting, no blame, no scandal, only respect. And Sandra realized the truth that would stay with her forever. Keanu Reeves did not need to raise his voice to change the world. He only needed to lower it so that people could finally hear what mattered most.